From a very young age, attractive women begin to receive messages, often subtle, sometimes loud and clear, that their appearance is their most valuable currency. Compliments about looks come first. Doors open more easily. Opportunities arise without much explanation. And while on the surface it may seem like a blessing, the deeper reality is far more complicated. Being praised for beauty becomes a double-edged sword. Over time, many women begin to notice that their character, intellect, and values are quietly being pushed to the background. People aren't asking who they are, but rather admiring what they are. It's not just about strangers on the street or followers on social media. This dynamic shows up in schools, workplaces, friendships, even families. An attractive woman's achievements are often diminished, questioned, or completely overshadowed by assumptions that her success must have come easier because of her face, her body, her charm. Even when she's worked twice as hard, learned twice as much, or navigated pain in silence, the focus remains fixated on the exterior. And when your value is constantly reduced to how you look, something starts to fracture inside. It doesn't happen overnight, but it grows quietly. A deep, unspoken question starts to rise. Do they see me or just the image of me? You see, beauty has a way of becoming a mask, one that others impose, and eventually one you might feel forced to wear. There's pressure to smile when you don't want to entertain when you feel empty, to meet a standard that you didn't sign up for. People begin to project fantasies onto you, expecting confidence, perfection, desirability, without ever stopping to consider your humanity. It's not about being ungrateful for attention. It's about realizing that attention is not the same as connection, and being admired is not the same as being known. And here's where it starts to hurt the most. When you try to step beyond the physical and share your truth, your ideas, your struggles, you're often met with resistance or disbelief. If an attractive woman shows vulnerability, she's told she's being dramatic. If she asserts herself, she's called arrogant. If she shares wisdom, people assume it must come from someone else. The more she tries to be seen for who she is, the more invisible she feels. And that kind of invisibility, the one that happens in full view of the world, is devastating. Imagine spending your entire life developing your mind, your resilience, your heart, only to realize that most people don't even bother looking past your skin. You could speak 5 languages, build a business, overcome trauma, and yet people will still ask, how do you stay in shape? Or what's your skincare routine? It's not wrong to care about beauty, but it's dangerous when beauty becomes the only lens through which someone is judged. And for attractive women, that lens follows them everywhere. There's also an internal trap that forms when beauty is overvalued. Over time, some women begin to rely on their looks for validation because it's what gets the most immediate reward. It's easy to confuse being desirable with being worthy, but those two things are not the same. When your confidence is built on compliments, it becomes fragile. You start chasing praise instead of purpose, and when the praise fades or shifts to someone younger, newer, trendier, it can leave you hollow, unsure of who you really are without it. This constant reinforcement of outer beauty over inner value can also rob women of the opportunity to fully discover themselves. If everyone around you is rewarding your appearance, where's the motivation to dig deeper, to stretch your intellect, to build resilience? The tragedy is not that beauty fades. The tragedy is that many women never get the chance to build an identity beyond it until it's too late. And society is complicit in all of this, from media to marketing to casual conversation. We are taught to rank women based on how they look. And attractive women, despite seeming like they have it all, are caught in a trap that most never talk about. They live in a world that demands they stay beautiful to be seen, but simultaneously punishes them for the attention beauty brings. They are envied, sexualized, underestimated, and misunderstood all at once. And while it might look like they're winning, the truth is, they're often fighting battles no one acknowledges. What we need to start recognizing is that being attractive does not exempt someone from pain. In many cases, it creates a very specific kind of pain, the pain of being misjudged, reduced, and robbed of the chance to be fully human. It's the pain of being looked at constantly but rarely looked into. And it's that silent ache, that craving to be understood, not just seen, that haunts many beautiful women behind the smile. Until the world learns to value depth over decoration, we will keep losing the brightest minds behind the most admired faces. That is the silent tragedy of being beautiful in a world that refuses to look deeper. The irony of being an attractive woman is that while the world might assume you live in constant comfort and privilege, the truth behind the curtain often tells a very different story. One of the most complex and painful realities is the way people, especially men, project their own desires, assumptions, and fantasies onto you without ever truly knowing you. It's not just about being noticed, it's about being misinterpreted over and over again. And when those assumptions become expectations, when those expectations turn into entitlement, the emotional weight becomes almost unbearable. When someone is constantly viewed through a lens of desirability, there's often little room left for authenticity. An attractive woman walks into a room, and before she even speaks, some people have already built an entire narrative about who she is. Maybe they assume she's shallow, that she's used to getting what she wants, that she must be manipulative or high management or playing some sort of game. They don't see a person, they see a reflection of their own insecurities or fantasies. And so instead of being met with curiosity, she's met with judgment. Instead of being asked, who are you really? She's measured by how well she fits someone else's idea of who she should be. For many attractive women, this kind of projection shows up most intensely in romantic dynamics. There's an unsettling pattern. People become infatuated with the image, not the individual. They chase the version of you they've invented, and when you start to show the real you, your flaws, your fears, your boundaries, they begin to pull away, become frustrated, or even resentful. It's as if your humanity is seen as a betrayal of their illusion. And what's worse, you may begin to internalize the idea that your true self isn't enough, that being loved means performing, that being accepted means hiding. And then comes the darker side of all this, the entitlement. Some people, fueled by attraction and assumption, begin to believe they deserve something from you: attention, affection, access. And if you don't offer it, you're labeled cold, arrogant, or ungrateful. The pressure to be nice becomes suffocating. A polite smile is misread as flirtation. A boundary is seen as rejection. Suddenly, your simple decision to exist becomes someone else's emotional battlefield. And the burden of managing other people's perceptions becomes your daily task, one that slowly chips away at your sense of peace. Even in platonic or professional settings, the projection doesn't stop. Some men feel challenged or emasculated around attractive women, and instead of addressing their own discomfort, they mask it with passive aggression, dismissiveness, or even hostility. Others might attempt to claim you socially, treating you more like a status symbol than a person. And it's not just men. Women, too, can project their own insecurities, forming instant opinions before a word is exchanged. Competition, comparison, and subtle exclusion are realities many attractive women face. Not because of who they are, but because of what others think they represent. This constant cycle of being misread creates deep emotional fatigue. You begin to question every interaction. Do they really like me for me? Am I safe to be vulnerable here? What are they expecting from me that I didn't agree to? Trust becomes harder to build when people relate to a version of you that doesn't exist. And slowly, without even realizing it, many attractive women begin to shrink themselves, not physically, but emotionally. They dim their energy, avoid eye contact, downplay their wins, all in an effort to control the projections, to keep the misunderstandings at bay. But even that doesn't always work, because the truth is, when someone has made up their mind about you based on how you look, it doesn't matter what you say or how you behave. You are no longer a person in their eyes. You are a screen onto which they project everything they want, fear, or feel entitled to. And that realization, when it finally sinks in, can be devastating, because deep down, all any human really wants is to be seen clearly, not as a fantasy, not as a symbol, but as a whole person in all your complexity and contradiction. The emotional toll of living under constant projection is profound. It creates a quiet loneliness, even in rooms full of admirers. It makes you second-guess genuine kindness. It creates a kind of emotional armor that's hard to take off, and over time, it can lead to numbness, cynicism, or complete emotional withdrawal. Not because you don't want connection, but because you've been burned too many times by people who weren't connecting with you at all. They were connecting with the story they told themselves about you. So many attractive women carry this silent weight. They show up, they smile, they keep it together, but inside, there's a constant awareness. I'm not being seen. I'm being imagined. And that dissonance between how you're perceived and who you truly are, that's where the pain lives. That's where the identity starts to blur. That's where the need for healing begins. You're not here to be the mirror for someone else's fantasy. You're here to be seen, known, and loved for exactly who you are, not for how well you fit into a dream that was never yours to begin with. There's a paradox that often shadows the experience of attractive women, something most people never stop to consider. It's the assumption that someone who is beautiful must naturally be confident, that beauty and self-assurance walk hand in hand. That if someone has a face that draws attention, a presence that turns heads, then surely they must feel powerful, validated, even untouchable. But what so many fail to see is that external beauty doesn't automatically equate to internal strength. And in some cases, it can actually make developing that confidence even harder because when the world fixates on how you look, it becomes easy to confuse being seen with being valued. The compliments come in early and often, sometimes before you've even had a chance to form your own sense of self. You're so pretty, you're stunning, you should model. Those messages can feel flattering at first, but they start to create a framework where your worth is tied to your appearance. And when your identity is built on something that's externally validated, it becomes fragile. It means your self-esteem is at the mercy of other people's reactions. You don't get to own it. It gets rented out day by day depending on how others respond to you. This kind of external reinforcement doesn't teach real confidence. It teaches young girls to pay attention to how they're perceived, to control the way they move, dress, and speak, just to maintain the praise. And underneath all of that attention is a silent fear. What happens if I stop being pretty? That question lingers in the background, quietly eroding the foundation of self-worth. Because beauty, no matter how praised, is temporary. And when your value has been built on something that fades, the anxiety around maintaining it can be crippling. What's worse is how hard it is to talk about this kind of insecurity when you're attractive. The world isn't always kind to women who admit to feeling insecure while also being admired. There's a kind of shame attached to it. People assume you're fishing for compliments, being disingenuous, or worse, ungrateful. It's as if beauty cancels out your right to struggle. But the truth is, insecurities don't care how symmetrical your face is. They don't care how many followers you have or how many people stop and stare. Insecurities run deeper. They live in the stories we tell ourselves when no one's watching. They're born from the gap between how the world sees us and how we truly see ourselves. And that's where the real danger comes in. Because when your inner voice doesn't match the outer attention, a quiet war begins inside. You start to question your accomplishments. You wonder if you're respected for your intelligence or just tolerated for your looks. You hesitate to speak up because you've been talked over so many times by people who assumed you had nothing to say. And eventually, even though the world keeps telling you how beautiful you are, you start to feel invisible in every other way. Many attractive women begin to hide parts of themselves just to protect what little self-worth they're clinging to. They stay in relationships longer than they should because the person loves how they look. They accept jobs or attention that feel hollow because at least someone is noticing. They downplay their ambition, their ideas, their complexity, because the moment they show up fully, someone gets threatened, or someone walks away, or someone says, wow, I didn't expect that from you, and it chips away little by little at the belief that they can be fully seen and still fully loved. Confidence, real confidence, can only come from being accepted as you are. Not just admired, not just desired, but truly accepted. And that kind of confidence requires more than validation. It requires depth. It comes from doing the inner work, from building your own values, your own identity, your own voice, even if no one is clapping, especially if no one is clapping. It means anchoring your self-worth in something stronger than appearances, something unshakable. It means learning to say, I am enough, even when I'm not being praised, even when I'm not being noticed. Attractive women are often robbed of that journey because the applause starts before they even walk onto the stage. And so the hard work of self-definition gets delayed or dismissed. The identity that's projected onto them becomes a costume they're afraid to take off. And when they finally try to step out of it, when they try to speak with authority, express pain, or set a boundary, they're often met with confusion, resistance, or resentment because the world liked the silent, smiling version better. But healing begins when you stop performing, when you stop tying your worth to the attention when you start building confidence from the inside out, not as a reaction to how others treat you, but as a declaration of who you are. It's not easy, it's vulnerable, it's slow, but it's also the most powerful thing you can do, because once your confidence comes from truth instead of image, no one can take it away from you. Not time, not rejection, not even the silence. There's a subtle but deeply painful reality that many attractive women quietly carry: the feeling of being resented, envied, or misunderstood by other women. It's not often spoken about openly because it's uncomfortable, and even naming it out loud can sound like self-praise or vanity. But it's not about vanity. It's about navigating social dynamics that become complex the moment beauty enters the room. Not because the woman chooses to make it that way, but because of how others perceive and respond to her presence. From a young age, girls are taught to find their place among peers, to bond over shared experiences, insecurities, and growth. But for a girl who's considered beautiful, there's often a fracture in that bonding. Instead of finding connection, she might find distance. Instead of support, suspicion. Other girls may look at her and assume things. She must be full of herself. She must think she's better than everyone. She must get everything handed to her. But those assumptions don't come from who she is. They come from projections of who others think she is. And that's a lonely place to live in. As that girl becomes a woman, those dynamics don't necessarily improve. In fact, in environments where competition is more subtle, whether in careers, relationships, or social circles, the divide can grow wider. Attractive women often notice it in the way other women change around them. A friendly conversation becomes guarded. A compliment is laced with sarcasm. A group outing turns into whispered judgments or exclusion. And it's not always overt. Sometimes it's just a shift in energy, a look, a sudden coldness that leaves her wondering, what did I do wrong? But the answer isn't about her actions. It's about the discomfort her presence triggers in others simply because she's perceived a certain way. It's important to understand that this isn't about blaming other women. It's about recognizing the silent wounds that envy and comparison can create. In a culture that constantly pits women against each other, that teaches us to measure ourselves by impossible beauty standards, it's not surprising that women sometimes struggle to support one another without insecurity creeping in. But for the woman on the receiving end of that projection, it can feel like emotional exile. She's there, showing up, trying to connect, but people have already made up their minds about her. And what makes this harder is the fact that she's not allowed to express that pain, because the moment she says, I feel left out, someone replies, but you're beautiful, you have nothing to complain about, as if beauty is immunity, as if being physically admired cancels out emotional pain. But the truth is, being envied doesn't feel good. Being misunderstood doesn't feel powerful. It feels isolating. And it teaches attractive women to play small, to dim their light, to minimize their presence, just to avoid conflict or jealousy. They stop speaking up, stop celebrating wins, stop expressing joy because someone might take it the wrong way. This leads to a paradox where a woman who appears to have it all is often the one who feels the most emotionally disconnected. She can't form close female friendships, not because she doesn't want to, but because she's constantly navigating the unspoken tension in the room. She learns to read between the lines, to anticipate the shifts in tone, to feel when someone is smiling to her face but resenting her behind her back. And over time, that kind of emotional vigilance becomes exhausting. It wears down trust. It makes genuine connection feel impossible. What's heartbreaking is how this cycle could be broken so easily, with understanding, with compassion, with sisterhood. If we could stop seeing beauty as a threat and start seeing it as just one small part of a whole person, so much healing could happen. Because the woman being envied is likely carrying her own battles. She might be struggling with insecurity, anxiety, lost things no one sees because they're too focused on the surface. And the woman doing the envying, she's likely battling her own feelings of not being enough, her own sense of invisibility. The tragedy is that both women are suffering silently when they could be supporting each other instead. We often talk about empowering women, about lifting each other up. But empowerment isn't just about cheering when someone's down. It's also about not tearing someone down just because she seems to be up. It's about allowing each woman, beautiful or not, to be complex, to be vulnerable, to be human. It's about creating spaces where women can shine without being punished for it, where beauty isn't seen as arrogance, but simply as one thread in the fabric of someone's identity. For the attractive woman, healing begins with refusing to internalize the projections. It means remembering that someone else's discomfort with your presence isn't a reflection of your worth. You don't have to shrink to be safe. You don't have to dull your light to be loved. Your existence isn't too much. And the right people, the real ones, won't feel the need to compete with you. They'll stand beside you, celebrate you, see you. And in a world that often misunderstands what it means to be both beautiful and real, that kind of understanding is the rarest and most precious gift of all.